Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here shortly. Grab your books. This is book club. Yes, it's career happy hour. It's Friday. It's happy hour somewhere. And today we're going to be covering this book. I took a nice picture of myself because last time I did this, the green screen actually caught up in the yellow and was not able to broadcast the book. Oh, look at that. Let me silence that. If I got my mobile device doing the background work here. We'll get started in just a second. Good to have you back, everybody. Hey, it's Andrew Beach, Executive Coach. I'm a teacher of self-education. I help you communicate your value to find great opportunities faster, whether you're working or not. And today, we are continuing our book club efforts. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and leave those in the chat. I think is it on this side? Must be on that side. This is free coaching. I want you to take advantage of this time that we have together. I will answer some questions at the end. I do those on the mobile device. So go ahead and put those in the chat box, whether you're joining us on Periscope, LinkedIn, YouTube, or my Facebook group, How to Find Jobs Without a Resume. So go ahead and take advantage of this time that we have together so that we can get better, so that we can be better. So today we're covering chapter 1 of the networking book that I mentioned the other day, actually last week. And there's a link in the comments, whether that's down below or off to the side, on how to get that book. It's currently out of print. That's why I'm doing this, is we're having a book club together, so you can get the audio version of this book. So we'll get started here in just a second. Let me know where you're joining from. Be awesome. Hey, Laura, good to have you. So we're going to be covering chapter 1 in the book today, and I was just going to dive in. The title of the book is The Wall Street Journal National Business Employment Weekly Book. It was a series of books in career. I think there's one on resume, there's one on interviewing, and this one happens to be on networking, and it's fantastic. The subtitle is Insiders' Strategies for Tapping the Hidden Market where Most Jobs Are Found. And it offers a special bonus, a 4-week subscription to the Wall Street Journal. Anyway, this book is from 1994, I believe. But we're going to jump right in. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Let me go here to our next slide. Okay, Chapter 1. What networking is and what it's not. Defining our terms. In the context of your job search or career transition, networking can best be described as the systematic development and cultivation of informal, interpersonal contacts and relationships for 3 purposes. Number 1, to compile information that helps with focusing your job search objectives, learning about trends, events, or facts relevant to your search. And if you're really lucky, hearing about existing job openings. 2, to gain as much exposure as possible in the job market. So first one, information. Second one, exposure. Makes sense to me. And number 3, to gather more names and referrals so that you can continue to expand your network, gain more information sources, get more exposure, obtain still more referrals, and so on. So there's 3 parts there. Gathering information. Hopefully there's a job in there, but it's not incumbent on you to get a job. 2, to actually get some exposure for your brand message. And 3, to get more names and more connections. And that's an agenda, actually, that most people can agree to. The crucial word in this definition is systematic. What most job seekers call networking is often no more than sporadic and disorganized badgering of a few relatives or friends with a desperate plea. Do you know of anyone who has openings for someone like me? No? Well, if you hear of anything, would you let me know? Sound familiar? This hit or miss approach, particularly if you don't communicate your job search objectives clearly, or if you imply that you're willing to take any job that comes along, may produce an occasional lucky accident, but it's not an effective way to develop a variety of opportunities. No wonder so many disillusioned would-be networkers give up in disgust, take the first position that's offered, and are heard to say, I tried that whole networking thing with my friends and it didn't produce anything. Skillful networking may appear low-key and informal, but it's not just a matter of randomly calling a few friends in hope of magical rescue from the miseries of the job market. It's a planned, structured, and very time-consuming campaign that usually starts with friends, acquaintances, and relatives. This stage is often called contact development, but rapidly moves on to meetings with people you don't know, who refer you to still more people you don't know. If you follow the maxim that a successful networking meeting is one that yields 2 more names than you went in with, you'll see a rapid geometric progression in your sources of information and your opportunities for market exposure. This multiplication effect produces greater knowledge, deeper perspective, more choices, and above all, the feeling that you're in control of the job search process and have left almost nothing to chance. That's huge, because most of us out there are likely doing online applications and you have virtually zero control over that process. So networking in that case is superior. In a world where all the valuable information and attractive job openings aren't neatly organized like supermarket aisles, your best chance for success is to do anything and everything you can to get the word out and bring the information in. An effective job search is basically a numbers game. I actually don't like that word, numbers game. I don't believe it's a game. I think you can gamify it, but it's really an opportunity for you to consider it a metric of a quantifiable metric that you can track. Let's look at it that way. The more people you meet, the better results you'll get. You have to play a lot of numbers to have the best chance of winning the game. You will reach a point in your job search where all the broad-scale information you've gathered will help you to narrow your focus and to find your objectives succinctly. At that point, when your local library and other usual sources are no help, networking can be a remarkable vehicle for tracking down specific pieces of information. Want to know the name of the new director of field service engineering for Worldwide Oil Well Services? Need to wrangle an introduction to the managing partner of a new venture capital firm? Friend of a friend introductions are a major part of networking's operational repertory. Now, remember that this book was published before LinkedIn gained dominance. And yes, you can find a lot of these people on LinkedIn, but you may not be able to get a conversation with them always. So coming from a position of introduction is always better than direct cold contact. Where did networking come from? 30 years ago, the word networking wasn't in the common parlance of the job seeker. Normal people found jobs through ads. Top executives were placed by headhunters. College graduates and entry-level applicants flooded the job market with hundreds of form letters stapled to exuberant resumes. That was how it was then. Life was simple. Headhunters changed all that when the executive search industry went through a period of dramatic growth. As they conducted high-stakes searches, the headhunters soon learned that working informally through contacts was the best and fastest way to get valid information and identify attractive candidates. Placing ads produced a need to screen hundreds of resumes, each of which depicted a bottom-line-oriented, shirt-sleeved go-getter. The anecdotal information derived from informal chats and contacts often unearthed the best talent and gave a much more accurate picture of candidates' strengths and weaknesses. Most major headhunters don't welcome unsolicited resumes, and many throw them away without reading them. That should give you some pause, shouldn't it? Isn't that their job, to read your resume? But it sounds like, at least Doug Richardson believes, that most of them throw it away. In this case, it's the delete button in the email. Headhunters rapidly refined informal gossip into an art form, a creative technique. They found that they didn't have to begin with known contacts, starting absolutely cold and using networking phone calls. One person suggests another person who suggests another, and so on. A skilled researcher is an executive search firm often can identify several qualified candidates within a couple of hours. In these calls, the headhunters aren't dealing with the polished and sanitized information presented in resumes. Isn't that interesting? Polished and sanitized information in resumes and cover letters. They're getting subjective, personalized opinions that often paint a far more accurate picture. Stan is a marvelous planner and a good financial guy, but he seems to have a real difficulty working with self-confident women. That's great. Another advantage of skilled networking is that it develops good information, not just a lot of information. That was a good section. What does networking look like? Because we're often confused about that. Picture yourself engaged in a brief, informal, face-to-face meeting, and you'll be picturing yourself networking. As we'll see in later chapters, a lot of thought goes into planning, scheduling, and orchestrating networking meetings. But the main mechanism is people chatting with people. Networking is essentially a social activity. It can be done by phone or letter, but it gets stiff and creaky when subjected to too much formality, lofty rhetoric, or the confines of the written page. Because it's rooted in human nature, networking brings out the best and worst in people. As in other expressions of human nature, we see a strange mix of altruism, self-interest, logic, and irrationality, integrity, and pettiness. Networking can be exhilarating and uplifting, or it can produce hurt, frustration, and anger. Expect those results going in, and you'll be all right. The great networking adventure can include a fair amount of happenstance and coincidence. Overhearing chance comments on a commuter train, running into a college roommate on a street corner, seeing an intriguing item in the Wall Street Journal, getting a bit of gossip by phone from a breathless friend. Networking is built on information and comes into play whenever and however information is shared. Remember, you may receive information from unplanned and unexpected places, but it's the systematic, planned use of that information that makes networking more effective than any other job search technique. Over the years, networking has moved from use to overuse and then to frequent abuse. The word has become a cliche, a catch-all for a variety of activities that don't even remotely resemble the planning and organization of a structured campaign to gather and disseminate information. Unless you consider any informal interpersonal contact as part of networking, for example, you can hardly consider the practice of swapping business card at a singles bar as effective networking. True, the primary vehicle for networking process is an informal, brief face-to-face meeting, but an effective networking meeting has a predetermined purpose, a structure, and an agenda. Let me say that again. An effective networking meeting has a predetermined purpose, a structure, and an agenda. Slipping your resume under someone's vodka gimlet doesn't qualify. Another common misconception is that networking involves asking a lot of people whether they have an existing job openings. This isn't networking at all. It's another technique called direct contact. Whether you use mass mailings, targeted letters, or face-to-face interaction, direct contact is a straight-out request for employment. By contrast, networking involves the sharing of information. With direct contact, the underlying question is, can you employ me here and now? Everyone shies away from such high-stakes solicitation, especially people who know you and really would like to help you, but can't. If you're unemployed, have you noticed how many of your friends seem to be avoiding you? They're afraid you're going to dash up to them, drop on your knees figuratively, and beg them to rescue you. Odds are they can't do much to help at the moment. By asking for a level of help they can't provide, you provoke enormous guilt in them. I don't think you recognize that. You invoke or provoke enormous guilt in them because they can't help you. And they want to. They really do. They find it easier to stay away from you than risk experiencing such discomfort. One major reason why networking is getting a bad name is that too many job seekers disguise direct contact overtures as networking meetings, thereby making a high-stakes confrontation out of what was supposed to be a low-key get-together. In one job search seminar, participants were being instructed on how to decompress a request for networking meeting with a gentle disclaimer, such as, "Let me emphasize in asking for this meeting, I don't expect you to have a job for me or even know of any openings." Isn't that refreshing? At this point in my job search, my purpose, that's the agenda, is to get some advice, a little market exposure, and perhaps names of a few people I could call to expand my network of contacts. Could anybody agree to that agenda? Absolutely. A contemptuous snort came from the back of the room. "I could never say that," boomed one participant. "I'm looking for a job." I'm not going to lie like that. He was absolutely right. If you think there might be an opening or opportunity with a certain employer, it is devious to use a networking request as a subterfuge to get a quick and dirty job interview. Suppose, however, in a networking meeting, someone suddenly says, "Gee, we really could use someone with your credentials. What would you think about working in a place like this?" Great. At that point, you're not networking anymore. Okay? You've entered interview country. But unless and until the other person raises the ante, it's up to you to keep the networking meeting low pressure, informal, and conversational. There's nothing illicit about direct contact and no sin in directly requesting employment if you think someone might have an opening. But direct contact and networking are fundamentally different techniques, and job seekers confuse them at their peril. In this same vein, networking isn't interviewing. An interview is a high-stakes negotiation session in which someone is trying to decide whether you're worth a lot of the company's money. A networking meeting is a low-stakes conversation that works best if almost nothing is involved except a few minutes of the contact's time. An interview is the potential employer's meeting. He or his representative sets the agenda, drives it, and is responsible for its outcome. A network meeting is your meeting. It is a favor someone has granted you, and it's your responsibility to make sure it goes only where it should. For this reason, you should eliminate the phrase informational interview from your vocabulary. A few years ago, this was another name for network meeting, but the term encourages confused agendas. If the phrase is supposed to suggest an interview where nothing is at stake, it's an oxymoron. The miner versus the antenna. It's amazing that networking gets such good results when almost every new job seeker misunderstands how networking works. Networking can be built on two fundamental mechanisms. Number one, mining the market, and number two, tuning in antennas. Too many people appreciate only the mining mechanism, the less effective of the two. Most candidates see the job market as a huge overhanging mountain. They stand at the foothills, unable to see over, around, or into the mountain. But they know that somewhere in that mountain are nuggets of gold, first-rate opportunities, or sensational job openings. But where? No map of the mountain is available, and there's no way to fly over it or x-ray it to find its treasures. The job seeker, let's call him JS, grabs a trusty pick and shovel and begins to dig a mine shaft into the mountain. When he's underway, say at point A, his brother-in-law, Al, who's a nice guy and eager to help, sends in a message. Al knows of no positive pathways to the treasures, but he suggests that JS try to intersect the path of his friend, Becky. JS thanks Al and directs his mine shaft over to Becky. She proves friendly. She used to date Al and says she'll call ahead to introduce JS to her boss, Chuck, who has several connecting mine shafts. JS thanks her, bids her adieu, and hacks out a tunnel that brings him to Chuck. Chuck refers JS to Deidre, who starts a chain of referrals, Deidre to Ellen, Ellen to Fred, Fred to Greg, Greg to Herman, and so on. JS is doing his part. He's digging and shoveling like crazy, tracking down the leads each referral provides, and initiating contact with lots of people. Eventually, Marvin refers him to Nancy, who looks at his resume and exclaims, "What a happy coincidence! We're looking for someone exactly like you." JS throws away his pick and shovel and prepares to get on with his work life. In this mining metaphor, JS is doing all the work. He's the only one gathering information, and the scope of his networking is limited only by how much time he has to dig tunnels and mine shafts, and how many people he can reach in that amount of time. This model assumes that, in the meetings with JS, each person contacted has provided all the help he or she is ever going to be able to give. Isn't that short-sighted? You know, that it's a tactical approach, really. After they refer JS to someone else, his networking contacts might as well be dead for all he cares. JS keeps shoveling frantically forward toward the next contact. He never looks back, revisits an earlier dig, or checks to be sure he hasn't dug a huge circle. Done this way, and only this way, networking uses up a lot of time and energy, yet it still produces its share of hits. Dig long and hard enough with the mining the market mechanism, and you'll eventually reach some gold. This is the restricted image most job seekers have of networking, a sweaty, tiring activity that has a sizable risk of missing gold altogether. Now, compare the mining mechanism to the antenna mechanism, and assume that JS mends some of his ways. After JS meets with Al, Al doesn't just vanish or die, he goes on living, attending lunches, crossing paths with colleagues, overhearing the spreading gossip. If JS has made a positive impression on Al by painting a succinct and attractive picture of his skills and abilities, that's called a brand, by the way, his image is now etched indelibly in Al's mind, whether Al likes it or not. JS has programmed Al, and Al has become an antenna tuned to receive signals on JS's channel. When Al hears a bit of information that twangs that channel, he will attend to it, and in a way that never did before his meeting with JS. In the course of all this networking, JS has created a whole bunch of antennas, all tuned to his wavelength. Instead of relying solely on his own ears, he now has the potential benefit of scores, even hundreds of listeners. To correct his earlier mistake, JS has to go back to retrieve the information. If Al hears of a job opening that's perfect for JS, he may take the time to give him a call. He knows that if he's responsible for his brother-in-law's landing well, JS will be beholden to him forever. That's called paying it forward. Less earth-shaking information may get remarked on and filed for a while as JS's other contacts, but if they don't hear from JS, then JS never gets the information. That's called incubation, right? So the branding statement followed by the incubation of connection is really important. Opportunities may have been missed before by not checking in periodically with Becky and Chuck and all the other antennae. JS knows better now. He keeps his channel active and stays in touch with his contacts. What is a network anyway? What is a network? A network. We started this chapter with a formal definition of networking, but it's important to nail down just what a network is. Think of a network as a group of people you know or can get to know for the purposes of sharing information. Every network is based on some form of interpersonal relationship, and each of us has a variety of networks operating at different levels and in different locations. Think of some of your possibilities. The people you vacation with, the network of vendors who provided your last employer with goods and services, your colleagues in your trade association, your family, your past and present clients, your fellow board members at a corporation or nonprofit foundation, and numerous other contacts, some formal, some informal, some long-lasting, some fleeting, some current, some dormant, some deeply meaningful, some excruciatingly superficial. To make the concept of a network manageable, let's best to separate our present and potential network members into 4 categories. 1. Personal. 2. Professional. 3. Organizational. And 4. Opportunistic. Look at the lists of people you know in these 4 categories, and you'll realize that you regularly associate with a lot of potential networking contacts and can reach many more by expending a little more effort. There will be some overlap among the 4 categories you socialize with: your colleagues at the laboratory, you choose a close friend as your investment banker, and you see a lot of business colleagues at the monthly Chamber of Commerce lunch. Each of your four main networks will have some distinctive features. However, your personal network, which include people who never see you with your game face on, that is, they don't encounter you in your employment capacity, and the relationship they enjoy with you is anchored in interpersonal bonds or personal service relationships. This is important because if you're using networking for career development and employment purposes, your game face is what you're selling. Your friends and relatives may care about you, want to help you, and feel a real stakeholding in your well-being. But they're not accustomed to thinking of you as a product. And if asked to tell someone what you do for a living, they may have a hard time giving a succinct and accurate description. In later chapters, we'll look at the technique for networking among your various constituencies. For now, remember, your friends know you only the way they know you. So the frame of reference makes a big difference. And this is an opportunity for you to practice. These people trust you, and if you're not used to networking or sharing a branding message, this is a great place to practice. The members of your professional network may also have an incomplete view of everything you are and do, but at least what they see is your game face. They see you at work, and they can convey your opinion or convey their opinion of the way you work. Often, they can understand the technical details of your profession when even your spouse can't describe your job duties exactly. Professional relationships tend to be more structured than personal ones, which generally puts a more business-like face on networking among professional acquaintances. In describing you to others or others to you, they'll tend to focus on what you do more than who you are. That's a great distinction because they may know you professionally and more anecdotally, just a surface level. They may not know what your specialties are or the fact that you're in a process. Your organizational network, let me make sure. There, oh wait. Most organizations have various sub-networks whose function is to disseminate the dissemination of informal information and protocols and or the preservation of power. They have familiar labels: the Good Old Boys Network, the Keepers of the Glass Ceiling, the Grapevine, the Minority, and the Women's Straight Talk Network, all those who hate management and others. They don't figure in the networking techniques described in this book because in most cases, the very existence of such sub-networks is denied. Members of these groups share valuable information with whom they want, not with outsiders asking for favors. Their goal is exclusivity, not accessibility. There's plenty of networks like that. And you'll know them when you see them because they typically are not very welcoming. Your organizational network will overlap heavily with your professional network. In your organizational affiliations like business associations, community groups, foundations, professional groups, boards of directors, boards of trustees, you may again be showing a face that is different from the one you display at the office or the one you show to your personal contacts. Here again, the opinions expressed about you or about networking contacts within these groups will reflect strengths and deficits in the organizational setting. A mediocre lawyer may be a superb motivator for United Way. A high-profile female executive may earn a lot of respect on Wall Street, but be criticized for her half-hearted participation in the several nonprofit boards on which she serves. So you need to think about your reputation as people perceive it, not as you think it is. So their perception, their reality. Other relationships, those that defy categorization, can add real spice to life. These are the chance connections, the unexpected coincidences, the ships passing in the night, the accidental conversation partners who are never seen again. They can include superficial relationships with a large group. That's like most network events, in my opinion. All your fourth grade classmates, for example, or deep, highly individual bonds. The woman whose baby you helped deliver in the taxi cab last year. Taken together. In fact, one of the things that I recognize is that if you're going through a career transition and you're out on the streets, don't try to do that alone. There's other people going through that same process with you, and that's kind of an affinity group, a bond that you're making there that's highly individualized. So each of you may be going through that situation. Now's an opportunity to lock arms and help each other. Taken together, your networks form a rich tapestry. Until you list all the personal relationships you can tap into for your job search, you cannot know their breadth and depth. Most job seekers tend to underestimate the enormous potential of their networks, particularly their personal or family networks. My cousin Myron, that idiot doesn't know anything. There's no point in wasting my time on him. I need to get in front of the people with clout, the people who can make things happen. You're right in wanting to network with the movers and shakers, particularly after you've used earlier networking efforts to clarify your focus and hone your self-presentation. But don't forget, Myron has eyes and ears. He may not be a great antenna, but he's still an extension of your information gathering resources. Include him. He sees a lot of people you don't see, and he goes to a lot of places you don't go. Every member of your personal, professional, organizational, and opportunistic networks is a possible antenna. Except one of the great frustrations of the networking game, you don't know when it's going to work. Hundreds of contacts, meetings, and conversations may appear to have produced little. Then Myron may call unexpectedly to tell you about an interesting conversation he overheard in the order line at Burger King. Skillful networks know they can't push the process. They can only do the process. That's a great quote. I might put that on my my LinkedIn quotes for the day. They work their prime contacts as adroitly as they can, but they keep in mind a key principle in maximizing job market exposure. There can be enormous strength in weak ties. Carefully cultivated networks offer one additional benefit that is often overlooked by job seekers in the heat of the campaign. After you find a new job, you still have your networks. Candid information is essential in all walks of life, and an essential discipline to successful people is care and feeding of their networks. When they found a satisfying new position, many former job seekers let their networks rust among the weeds. Maintaining networks is as much a systematic and structured process as creating them. One Philadelphia lawyer, a marvelous networker who managed the nearly impossible task of moving into law firm practice after starting her career in-house and spending 8 years there, is adamant that every name in her revolving file gets at least 2 phone calls, 1 letter, and a holiday card each year. 2 phone calls, 1 letter, and a holiday card each year. Is that difficult? That's 4 touches. This is a lot of work, and she's not even looking for a job. She's doing business development for her firm, and she is doing just fine. She's a highly visible figure in her business community. People seek her out for information, and in the course of doing so, they provide her with a lot of information as well. She's dialed in, hooked up, on top, in control. How great is it to be in control? Or at least feeling like you're in control. If you're going to spend all that time and effort meeting a lot of people during your job search, she says, it makes no sense to throw all that effort away after you land. That is indeed the number one thing that most people who have been part of a layoff or reduction in force say that they won't allow to happen again. They won't allow themselves to not maintain a network. And so there was a couple of pages in here. The memory trace. So there's like an inset section here on page 12. It's called For Your Information, the memory trace. People often file things mentally using visual cues, so it's important to meet people face to face when you're networking. But remember, the first impression is a lasting one. Setting your hair on fire in a networking meeting will definitely get you remembered, but it probably won't lead to many referrals. That is so true. And then there's a section here on the 4 network categories with some ideas on situations or people you can meet. That's on page 13. If you get the book, you can grab that situation. That does it for chapter 1. Let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Advice, information, resources. Yeah, that's a good acronym. Thank you for sharing that, Stuart. So the idea is we're always seeking 3 things: information, advice, connection to other people. And I don't know anybody that can't agree to that agenda. Let's see, just any additional advice for round 2 on-site interviews. It depends on who it's with. Okay, so my suggestion is I've got actually a interview checklist. It's just kind of a reminder document of things that I've run across with people I coach and me personally when I've been through interviews that I had to remember. So if you don't have a checklist, it's much like flying an airplane. I would never hop on an airplane with a pilot that didn't have a checklist completed. I don't know about you, but if you want, Laura, there is a interview checklist on my website, andrewbeach.com. It's under the resources section. Just plop in your email and it'll get handed off to you. If I have time, I'll send you a LinkedIn message with that information. Any other questions out there, go ahead and leave those in the chat. So really the things that we were talking about today is getting a foundational understanding of the networking. This really is an exceptional book. I highly recommend you pick it up and become part of our group here, our book club, if you will. Again, this is free coaching for you. If you have any questions, just go ahead and plop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer anything that you have. This is happy hour. It's time for you to dig in and have an opportunity to get some of your questions answered. So I do appreciate you showing up here. If you have any questions, go ahead and let me know in the chat. Oh, and we just released another episode on Job Seekers Radio this last Wednesday. I can't remember the title on it. Let me get to my podcast catcher, and I'll let you know the title of the episode. We recorded a bunch of new episodes, I think this last weekend. Let me get it for you here. Oh, yes. The top 4 things you can do to find meaningful work in a new city. We talked about people that relocate, and that's episode 075. So jobseekersradio.com/075. You'll get access to that, or you could just go to iTunes and look for Job Seekers Radio. And give us some feedback. If you have any questions that you want covered in the podcast, we can do that. Or even on these Fridays. If you have questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. I am absolutely happy to answer. Let me see if there's any additional questions here. All right, folks. Well, I do appreciate you joining us today. Spread the news. There's a share button down below. If you could share this with somebody you think might find it valuable, that is maybe having a difficult time networking, or if you yourself need additional support, please schedule some time in my calendar. I'm happy to do what I can to support your success. Hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Career Happy Hour on FAQ Friday. Take care.